So if you're noticing that emotions seem to be getting bigger even before puberty, you're not imagining it. And it doesn't mean that something is going wrong. This is really a normal stage. A lot of families reach this stage and they feel quite confused because what used to work doesn't seem to be working or helping anymore. Reactions feel much stronger and quicker, and sometimes they're harder to predict. Before we go any further, I want to be really clear about how I'm holding this video. This is about education. It's not about advice or therapy. And I'm not here to tell you what to do with your own child. What I'm here to do is to help you make sense of what you're seeing, because understanding often comes before change. And if this way of thinking is helpful, you're very welcome to subscribe. I share regular OT informed teachings like this, always focus on understanding rather than the quick fixes. Before puberty is even there are real changes that are happening in the brain and the nervous system. And even if you can't see that physically puberty is started yet, and it actually starts much younger than what you would think. So the parts of the brain that are involved in emotion and threat detection become much more reactive. And while the systems that help with perspective, impulse control, and regulation are there still developing, so that emotion and threat is right there. It's very reactive, but the other parts that might help to balance it out are not as well developed. So in everyday life, that means that emotions can arrive much faster, they can feel stronger, and they can take a lot longer to settle too. It's not so much about attitude or behavioural choices, it's more about the capacity that the young person has in that moment. So when emotions suddenly feel bigger than before, it's often because the system underneath is changing, and that's not because anyone is failing. It's a natural progression. From an occupational therapy perspective, instead of asking, how do I stop this? It's often more helpful to ask a different question. And it's about, what is this behaviour telling me about safety, about sensory load and autonomy at this stage of development? The question helps us to slow things down and understand what's actually happening. And let me briefly explain what I mean by each of these parts. So if we think about safety, when safety drops, even if it's subtly, the nervous system shifts and it goes into protection mode. And that can look like anger, it can look like shutting down, rigid thinking, controlling behaviour, or big reactions that were to really small things. At these moments, reasoning usually doesn't work, not because a young person is being difficult, but because their system is prioritizing protection over logic. So big emotions can be a sign that felt safety has dropped, not that behavior needs correcting. If we think about sensory load, we're thinking about sensory processing. This doesn't disappear as children get older. We all, as human beings, have sensory processing. But before puberty, sensory load can often accumulate across the day. So it can be the noise, the social demands, concentration, transitions, and it's our ability to cope with those things. So by the time a young person gets home, their system might be so overloaded, even if they seem fine on the surface. So sometimes emotions aren't really about what's happening emotionally at all, which can be so confusing. They're about a body that's just had too much for too long, and therefore you might do something different. Autonomy, if we think about that, so before puberty, the need for autonomy increases sharply. Support that once felt helpful suddenly feels intrusive to the young person, so they react to it. Questions can often feel like pressure. Problem solving can feel like control. What looks like resistance in a young person is often actually about autonomy protection, not about opposition. So big emotions can show up when a young person feels misunderstood, when they feel managed or they feel powerless, even when an adult's intentions are kind. One of the most frustrating parts of this stage is that strategies that used to work and you could always count on them suddenly stop working. And that's often because reasoning doesn't work when safety is low. So adding strategies can actually increase the load, and when the system is already overloaded, and help make that person feel like those strategies are actually a threat to their autonomy, even though you've introduced them with really good intentions. And it doesn't mean that the strategies are wrong. It means the timing and the interpretation matter more than the tools. And that's why we don't go for the quick fixes. And this is where many parents also feel really stuck. So they try harder in that exact moment when the system needs something really quite different. But if there's one thing I hope you can take away from this, it's that big emotions before puberty don't usually mean things are getting worse. They usually mean something important is changing underneath. You don't need to respond perfectly. You don't need to fix everything in the moment. Often the most helpful first step you can take is simply to pause and ask yourself, is this about safety? Is this about sensory load? Is it about autonomy? If intense emotions are part of everyday life right now, I've created a free guide that some families have found useful. It's about understanding those intense emotions rather than managing them. And you're welcome to download it if it feels supportive. There's a link down below. And if you like to hear more teaching like this over time, you're very welcome to subscribe. I share these reflections regularly, always with a focus on understanding and compassion. Thank you for being here, and thank you for taking the time to listen.